All right. Welcome those of you that are joining us. I see some people coming in now. Welcome everyone. I hope you can hear my voice and see our screen.
Bienvenidos todos que están acá. Espero puedan ver la pantalla. Veo muchas personas acá. Bienvenidos.
Welcome everyone. We'll start in just a couple of minutes. In the meantime, if you'd like to choose a language channel, you can choose Spanish or English.
Hola a todos, vamos a empezar en unos cuantos minutitos. Si por favor pueden ya escoger la interpretación, tenemos interpretación disponible, entonces si saben cómo, por favor ya pueden empezar a escoger interpretación.
Welcome everyone. It's just about a couple minutes after 6. We'll get going, I think, in just another minute. In the meantime, feel free to choose your language channel in the lower right-hand corner. It should look like a little world, and you can choose Spanish or English.
Vamos a empezar en un minutico, son las 6 pasadas. Por favor recuerden que pueden escoger ya el canal de interpretación, abajito en el globito, y escoger el canal español o inglés.
All right, I think say it one more time and then we'll probably get going. Welcome everyone to the Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan. We'll get going in just about a minute. In the meantime, if you'd like to choose a channel, in your lower right-hand corner, you should see a globe icon and you can choose Spanish or English.
Hola a todos, este es el encuentro para la reunión de las vías de bicicleta y vías peatonales de Kingston. Vamos a empezar en unos minutos, por favor, escojan el canal de interpretación, español o inglés.
All right, we're going to get going. Welcome tonight to the Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan, and I'm going to pass it over to our interpreters for just a moment.
Bienvenidos todos a la reunión sobre el plan básico de la vía de visita y de peatonal, y vamos a pasar ahora a los intérpretes. Entonces, hola a todos, mi nombre es Lala y junto aquí con Adri apoyaremos a esta reunión con la interpretación simultánea. Hello, my name is Lala, and together with Adri, we will support this meeting with simultaneous interpretation. Los organizadores de este evento se han comprometido a la justicia del lenguaje, y en esta reunión será bilingüe e interpretada del español al inglés y del inglés al español. The organizers of this event are committed to language justice, and this meeting will be bilingual and interpreted in Spanish to English and English to Spanish. La función de interpretación, como dijimos, ya está activada. The interpretation function, as we said, has already been activated. Para acceder a la función desde su computadora, busque el globito en la parte inferior de su pantalla e elija la interpretación de idiomas y luego seleccione su canal de idiomas. To access the function from your computer, find the globe at the bottom of your screen and choose a language interpretation, then select your language channel. Ahora, para acceder a la función desde su teléfono o tableta, busque los 3 puntitos en la parte inferior de la pantalla y toque más. Luego, interpretación de idiomas, después seleccionas tu canal de lenguaje y tocas finalizar. El tocar finalizar es el último paso que activa la aplicación de interpretación. So, For folks who are using a computer or a tablet, to access the interpretation function, you're going to find the 3 dots at the bottom of your screen and select more, then select language interpretation, then select your language channel and click done. It's important that you click done because this is the last step that activates the function. Todas las personas deberían elegir un canal de interpretación a no ser de que entiendan ambos idiomas, inglés y español. So everyone should choose a channel unless you fully understand both English and Spanish. Si tienes alguna dificultad accediendo a la interpretación, por favor, mándanos un mensaje en el chat. If you're having any issues accessing the interpretation function, please send us a chat message so we can support you. So ahora vamos a comprobar si los canales están funcionando. So now we're going to start seeing if the channels are working. Entonces, ahora vamos a empezar con el canal de inglés. Si me escuchan en el canal de inglés, por favor, den un dedito arriba. Veo una pregunta en el chat. I see a question in the chat. Y ahora vamos a confirmar que esté funcionando el canal de español. Sí, por favor, las personas, sí. Marcela nos responde que sí. Muy bien, entonces ahora va a empezar la interpretación. Peter B no tiene opción.
Shall we, Adriana, recommend the download coming out of the Zoom and downloading to the most recent Zoom download?
Una recomendación que a veces le hacemos a las personas es que si no están viendo, a veces tienen que bajar el último Zoom, como el Zoom más reciente. A veces las aplicaciones son más viejitas y no funcionan con la interpretación, entonces hay que bajar el Zoom más nuevo. ¿Ven? In English.
So if any of you do not see that globe icon, you can give that a try. If you do see the globe icon, please choose English or Spanish, and you should be able to hear the English and Spanish.
Entonces vamos a empezar con la introducción para todos. Crear espacios multilingües es un esfuerzo colectivo y se hace aún más importante en nuestra ciudad, donde sabemos que muchas de las personas hablan diferentes idiomas. De vez en cuando necesitamos comunicarnos con el hablante para no interrumpir la reunión y vamos a usar diferentes señales. A veces nos van a ver diciendo que hablemos despacio y vamos a hacer con las manitos y todos me pueden ayudar a hablar despacio. Entonces todos lo pueden hacer conmigo. También si necesitamos que la persona que está hablando hable más duro, vamos como a subir las manitos arriba. Entonces más duro. Y a veces van a ver que hacemos como un dedito de 1, significa que estamos pidiendo que solo una persona hable al mismo tiempo, porque no podemos interpretar varias voces. También les recordamos respirar, pausar o tener momentos de clarificación y silenciar el micrófono si no están hablando. También si van a haber conversaciones entre los panelistas, por favor, comparta su nombre antes de compartir para que el intérprete pueda decir el nombre y las personas puedan saber quién está hablando. Y también les invitamos a que tomen una pausita antes de transiciones. Finalmente, a los escuchantes del canal de interpretación en español, notarán que usamos la terminación E cuando refiriendo a una persona, en vez de la tradicional a o O. Esto no es un error de pronunciación. Esto es una decisión deliberada para resistir el binario de género y construir la inclusividad de género. Por favor, cualquier problema con la interpretación, no sufran en silencio. Déjenos saber inmediatamente y mándenos un mensaje por el chat. Y gracias por su compromiso con la justicia del lenguaje.
All right. Passing the mic, Adriana. All right, thank you, everyone. Welcome to tonight's public meeting. You are here for the Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan for the City of Kingston. I'm Emily Flynn. I'm the Director of Health and Wellness for the City of Kingston. I'm getting ahead of myself. I just want to welcome you in. Katie, could you move us to the next slide? Want to welcome you in. Here is a bit of an agenda of where we would like to go tonight. And leave this on here for a moment. And then I would like to just do a brief land acknowledgement, and then we'll get into some introductions and then move along with a lot of information that we have for you tonight. All right, Katie, if you don't mind changing the slide. I would like to say in this moment, it is with great gratitude and hopefully humility that we acknowledge that the land that we are discussing here today is the ancestral homelands of the Munsee Lenape people, who are the indigenous people of this land. Despite tremendous hardship in being forced from here in a series of subsequent displacements, today their communities reside in Oklahoma, Wisconsin, Canada, and elsewhere. For more information, please see delawaretribe.org and Native Land app. It's a really great app that shows all the native lands of the peoples in the location that you're at. Thank you, Katie. If you don't mind moving to the next slide. So we've come to some introductions. I'll kick us off. Hello again, my name is Emily Flynn. I'm the Director of Health and Wellness for the City of Kingston, and I am the project manager for the Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan here at the city. And I would like to now, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'd like to now pass it to Lee.
Hi, I am Lee Jones, a landscape architect. I prefer she, her pronouns. I am the project manager for Barton and LaJudas, the consulting firm that is working with the city for this pedestrian and bicycle master plan for the city of Kingston.
All right, Tom, were you going to introduce yourself, or should I move on to Katie?
No, I'll introduce myself. I'm Tom Robinson with Barton and LaJudas. I'm in the Rochester, New York office, and I also am a landscape architect, and I use he, him pronouns. And I'll pass it over to Katie.
Everyone, I'm Katie. I'm a community planner, also in the Rochester office at Barton and LaJudas. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm going to pass it to Liam.
Hi everyone, I'm Liam. I use he, him pronouns. I am a lifelong resident of Kingston and a civil engineer for Barton and LaJudas.
All right, thank you everyone. We're going to move on to some ground rules for tonight's meeting. We'd invite you all to please add questions in the Q&A box. We'll respond to them at designated times throughout the presentation. Comments can be entered in the chat box. All of the panelists will be able to see them tonight, and we'll record them. You are all muted, and you will remain so until the end of the presentation. All questions and comments will be logged and considered. A video recording will be available in Spanish and English, and a transcript will be made available on engagekingston.com. We also would like to invite Spanish speakers to ask questions. We have our interpreters here tonight for that is one of our reasons, so please do not hesitate to ask questions in Spanish. I also want to add, as the organizer for today's meeting, I reserve the right, if we have time to ask questions, I reserve the right to lock and pause the meeting and to eject anyone who's behaving inappropriately. And those are our ground rules. Katie, do you want to mention the polling stuff that we're doing tonight?
Sure, yeah. So we will be using an interactive polling app that's kind of embedded into PowerPoint. You can see at the bottom of this slide here, you've got two options for participating. You can either use the URL there, pollev.com/KatieDarcy394. And you can do that either on your smartphone or your computer, or you can just use your text function. You can text Katie Darcy 394 to the number 22333, and you'll be able to respond that way.
Katie, may I stop you? We're getting a message that on the English channel, they're not able to hear you. Are you on the English channel?
Let's make sure I am.
Yeah. want to try it again and we'll see if, so maybe someone can, oh, someone says they can hear you. Okay. Maybe it's just that one person, if you're having issues, not being able to hear, maybe try doing a different channel. So Katie, keep going. Sorry
Okay,
about
great. So we're gonna test this out with a few questions just to kick us off here. And if anyone has any questions about how the poll function works, please let us know in the chat or the Q&A. So our first question is a simple one. What is your primary language? So you're going to either text A, B, or C, or on the website, you can just choose the answer there. Looks like mostly English at this point. Let it go for a few more minutes and then we'll have another test question. Okay, so I'm going to move forward here. This is just to get a sense of who's in the room, the virtual room today. Are you a full-time resident, a part-time resident of the city of Kingston, a business owner or a stakeholder, other stakeholder of the city of Kingston, resident of a nearby municipality, employee or student in Kingston, or other? So just to reiterate, in order to use text function to respond, you're going to text to first join the polling. You're going to text the phrase Katie Darcy 394 to the number 22333, and that will get you into the polling, and then you can answer the questions after that.
And if
Katie, I'm on a web browser and it's saying web voting has not been turned on for this poll.
Okay, well, let's fix that then. Let me just stop my share real briefly.
It did for the first question, but not that second one.
My apologies. Give me 1 second here. Okay, looks like we should be set here. Let me reshare my screen. Oh, 1 second. Okay. Let me know if that works, Lee. Great.
It's still not working.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Give me 1 moment here.
Thanks for bearing with us, everyone. We think
Thanks, everyone. Yeah.
is important, as you know, part of our goals of this plan is to collect feedback. This is kind of a fun way to do it during the meeting. So bear with us a moment. I think it's going to be interesting to see the live results. So Katie's working hard at this.
Okay. It's telling me that it's live right now, so I'm not sure what the issue is, but just give me 1 more second, and then if not, we can just move forward. Ah, I see. That should be all set. I think it just wasn't enabled for the web, just text for some reason.
Yeah, it's good now.
Okay, great. Okay, so it looks like most people are, oops, there we go, full-time residents. We've got a few people who are from nearby, which is also great. And a few part-time residents and business owners. I'm going to move forward in the interest of time here. We've got one more question here before we delve in further. Just curious how often people in the room walk or bike in Kingston. Looks like we're mostly in the sometimes or often. But it's good to have a variety of different users in the group. It makes for a good conversation. All right, so looks like we're mostly in the middle here, which is to be expected. So great. Thank you guys all for responding to those polls, and we'll have polls kind of interspersed throughout the presentation, just to kind of keep soliciting input, and we will record these answers when moving forward. So I'm going to move to the next slide here and let's go through a quick project overview.
And that's me. And thank you, Katie. Can you pass to the next slide for me? And forgive me, y'all, I'm going to read a little bit. So the reason that we're here tonight is for all the reasons on the slide that you see. It's also what I'm about to say. So the Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan project will create a comprehensive plan that will support the city's efforts to improve conditions for active transportation users. Active transportation users are walkers, cyclists, scooterers, skaters, people that are not drivers. Those are all active transportation users. It will reduce vehicle congestions and emissions and support a culture of health here in the city of Kingston. The plan will be a set of documents that include a report of existing infrastructure, recommended and prioritized projects, an ADA transition plan, a list of education and enforcement strategies, and maps that will enable the city to prioritize and secure funding for projects that support a dynamic transportation network. An ideal transportation and active transportation network has well-connected streets and dedicated paths that are linked to local transit, for example, ferries and buses. Making these routes safe and convenient for all users can promote physical activity, recreation, environmental preservation, and help reduce negative health impacts. In December 2019, the city was awarded $60,000 from the New York State DEC grant to undertake this important initiative. The city is matching this cost with $60,000 in staff time. This is a lot of my time. In August 2021, the city went into contract with Barton and LaJudas, DPC, who is working with community members and staff and city staff to conduct research and develop the plan. We are here today to inform you about the project, including the planning process, objectives, and desired outcomes, to present the input we've received thus far, to ask for feedback, and to help with additional outreach, and to let you know the next steps. So there's a lot that we are trying to accomplish here, and we're hoping that tonight is one of the start. We've been working on it for a while, but it is another milestone in this project. And as we get into it more, in case I don't get a chance to say it later, I really hope that you all are able to help us get the word out and get more feedback and input on this plan. So that's a little bit about why we are here tonight. And I think, Lee, you were going to do project schedule. Do you want to say anything there?
Yeah, as Emily mentioned, we began working with the city at the end of last summer and kicked off the meeting in September, and we created a project advisory committee formed of community stakeholders, residents, business owners within the city to sort of work with us and with the city to help us drive this project forward. And also in the fall, we began our reaching out for our public engagement and created an online survey, which is also in hard copy form. This has been available on the Engage Kingston website, as well as at City Hall and other establishments throughout the city. And this survey we'll talk about further into this presentation, and will be available to the public for the next few months as well. In addition to that, we began our inventory and analysis for this project, which involves other forms of collecting data, including another crowdsourcing app, which is a combination of collecting data from the community as well, but it also is an interactive map. Again, we will give an example, a presentation of this later in the presentation to sort of walk you through how to access this and how to provide your input. In addition, we use time-lapse cameras at key intersections within the city. And also we as the project team did a 2-day bike and walking tour of the city. So that was with city staff, our project advisory committee members, and our BNL team to sort of introduce ourselves to the city and get to know the area better. We had our second PAC meeting at the beginning of this year, and now we are all here at this public meeting, our first public meeting. We'll be having another public meeting towards the end of this project, which would be the summer of this year, which we're hoping to do in person. And in the meantime, we're going to again continue to collect data from the public, as well as start assessing all the inventory and analysis that we've collected to date. And that's where we are right now. And Emily, you can sort of discuss further about the project outreach program to get the public involved.
Indeed. In the chat, I'm putting a link. I believe that should be the right one. That is to our public outreach plan. The city has put this document together, trying to document everything we've already done and everything that we plan to do to try to do outreach for this plan, for the master plan. It includes the list of the PAC meetings. The PAC is the Public Advisory Committee. Hopefully some of those members are on this call tonight. Those were community members that the city selected to help us guide this process. It also lists our public meetings, of which this is the first one that we mentioned. It lists what kind of tabling and tours we would like to do. It includes the crowdsourcing app that we'll talk more about in a moment. It talks about the surveys that are on engagekingston.com. Some of the names that I recognize in the attendance, I see a lot of the same names have submitted surveys. Thank you very much. Please help us get the word out about those surveys. Paper copies are at the Kingston Library, and there is also a collector box there. They're available in English and Spanish. They're also available at a few community businesses, Rough Draft, the Kingston Standard. They're at People's Place. They're at the Salvation Army, and a few other places. We hope to try to continue to do more distribution of those surveys. We do want to keep collecting input for another month or so. And then on engagekingston.com, you can do that survey digitally, or electronically on the website. Also, there's the flyers that we are putting around town. They're also on engagekingston.com. And I'm also still collecting input. If there's something in this outreach plan that is a major oversight, please let us know. If there's a community or group that you think would be interested in having me drop off flyers, please let me know. You can email me at eflynn@kingston-ny.gov. You can put it in the chat for us here, or you can get in touch with me another way. So I hope that you can see that in the chat, the link to our public engagement plan. I think, I hope I'm not forgetting another key part of that, but I believe that that's the plan. Next up, I think, was maybe another poll. Katie, is that right?
Yes, sorry. So this is another poll question to get some input here. So the question is, what do you think is the most effective way the city can support walking and biking in Kingston? And the answers are A, education and outreach, B, installing new infrastructure such as bike lanes, crosswalks, sidewalks. C is local regulations, policies, enforcement. D is repairing existing bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and E is other. So it looks like most attendees are responding B, installing new infrastructure. A decent amount of people also are interested in seeing repairs to existing infrastructure. And it looks like we have no others, but just in case anyone has some other thoughts on what else could help support biking and walking in the city, we will go to our next question, which is, if you answered other, how would you like to see the city support walking and biking more? D, which I believe was repairing existing infrastructure. All of the above. Events, maybe getting the word out, improving sidewalks, sure. Enforcement. Great, yeah, these are all really great responses and we appreciate you typing them in. Off-road trails. C. Shower spaces. Bike-friendly businesses. Again, enforcement, all of the above. This is great. Cyclovia. Great. And it looks like we're actually getting a few responses in the Q&A too. So we've also heard public transit amenities, automatic pedestrian signalization, and leading pedestrian intervals. So yeah, this is all really great and we appreciate the input and keep it coming throughout the presentation. Education, great. Okay, so we're gonna move forward here. And I'm gonna go through a little bit of the inventory and analysis that we've completed to date. And this has kind of been a two-pronged approach that eventually will marry together, and we'll call the one side our qualitative analysis, which is mostly getting input from the people in this meeting, the people who have responded to the survey, what we've heard talking to people during our bike and walk tours while we were in the city, and the crowdsourcing app. And that's just to understand the thoughts and opinions of the residents, people who are out there on a day-to-day basis, and what they think are the biggest issues and opportunities in the city in regards to improving biking and walking in the city. And then on the flip side, we have our more quantitative analysis, which is more of a technical analysis of what's out there in terms of roadway roadway widths, conditions, that sort of thing, a more objective approach. And basically what we strive to do is where those two things overlap is our clear recommendations. Our data is supporting it from our technical side. We've got public support from it on the other hand of things, and that typically results in a pretty strong set of recommendations for the city moving forward. So just to give a brief summary of some of the things we've looked at so far.
Katie,
yes.
Before you go on to this, can I just answer a couple of the questions that are in the chat and the Q&A?
Absolutely. Yep.
One is asking us, is there any way to have another public meeting before a draft is written? And obviously I stated the second public meeting would be in the summer, and hopefully in person. Well, we have two public meetings scheduled at this time, tonight's, and then again, one in the future in the summer. All this public engagement and this public input that we're talking about here is all open and will be open until April. And as Emily mentioned, there's the Engage Kingston website where we are always taking comments and all of that. You're able to sign up there with your email and to be able to be connected to this project and understand when updates are happening. So the intention is that we'll continue to update and provide information to all those signed up on Engage Kingston, as well as on the city's website. So while we may not have another formal public meeting, the portal to public response input will be open for the coming months, and we welcome all of that input. And another question was regarding existing infrastructure that currently is not maintained. For example, the O&W to Hurley, the signage for the brand new Empire Trail is not good. So the question is, why are we spending money here as opposed to maintaining what already exists? And I just want you to understand that this pedestrian and bicycle master plan is not a master plan for new infrastructure. What it is an analysis of the existing city's infrastructure, recommendation for improvements, possible recommendations for where there might be gaps identified within the city for the pedestrian and or bicycle network. And so this final report is a combination of recommendations for improvements to existing infrastructure, and then possibly the recommendations for additional infrastructure to expand the current network. I just wanted to make that clear before Katie, you get into sort of our initial findings.
Great. Thanks, Lee. As both Lee and Emily have mentioned, we have a community survey out there right now. It's been out for a few months, but we are looking for more answers as we kind of go through this planning process. Won't go too much into this now, but again, it's on Engage Kingston online. It's available at several local businesses and entities, and it was distributed at a lot of events before it got cold out this year. So just a brief summary of the results that we've gotten so far. Some of the major themes that we've pulled away from the preliminary results is that people are really interested in the experience of walking and biking, meaning that they want it to be a pleasant visual experience. They want to do it for their well-being or their mental health. They want to do it for physical well-being or exercise, or just because it's fun and it's nice to go out and spend time with their family or friends. So I think there are some really interesting takeaways from that in terms of our potential recommendations moving forward in terms of supporting just a bike and walk friendly environment. Some of the barriers that we've identified are safety, unsurprisingly, is a major concern, and more specifically, bad driver behavior has led to people feeling discomfort or unsafe when they're walking. And we've also heard through the polls today that lack of enforcement is a concern in the community. So that's something we'll certainly hone in on when we move forward with this project. Some of the other barriers is just maybe people don't live in an incredibly walkable area. It might be too far, or too difficult to access a store or your workplace or the library. Also lack of bike infrastructure and lack of access to bikes was something that we heard a lot. And then just generally speaking, the environment, whether it be it's too cold out, the roads aren't plowed appropriately, it's steep slopes are prohibitive, or the sidewalks are in poor condition and it just doesn't feel comfortable to walk on them. So this has all been really insightful so far, and we look forward to getting more responses and kind of refining these takeaways. And again, just to reiterate, if you could get the word out on the survey, we would really appreciate it. The more responses we get, the more informed this plan is and the more tailored it is to your community. So I want to switch gears to our other kind of online tool that we have deployed. We deployed this in late fall this year, and that's our Crowdsourcing app. As Lee mentioned, it's basically a interactive web map that allows you to pinpoint specific locations where you might see there are issues or opportunities for improving biking and walking in Kingston. And then you can also submit photos, videos, and just any thoughts you might have on improvements throughout the city. So I'm going to quickly go through the app online and give you a quick tutorial. And if anyone has any questions, we'll take them after I kind of walk through this. So this is how it looks on a web browser. It's also configured to work on a mobile device, so that should you be out walking or biking and you see a specific problem that you might run across, you can just pull up this app and use your current location and kind of place a pin right where you are. So everyone can proceed as a guest. There's no login. If you want more information, there's a little right up here. But if you click proceed as guest, you'll get the same information more or less in this splash screen. And it just gives a little background information about the project as well as the app, and then some contact information if anyone has any questions. So you can click out of that and you'll see that the base map is not quite loaded, but hopefully it'll load here. But there are 4 categories here on the right side that say, or that you can submit to. So add your destination is basically an origin destination question. So where you're typically walking or biking, or what's a common route that you take between your home and work, or maybe work and the library or something like that. And any thoughts you might have on that particular route. The other categories are bike concerns, pedestrian concerns, or transit concerns, specifically related to accessing a transit stop. So I'm just going to go through here and do an example. So if you're interested in submitting a bike concern, you can click that tab and you'll see every other entry that's been submitted so far. So you'll see there's been a decent amount submitted. And the heart and the numbers on the right side here are how many people have voted in agreement with those. So that's really great for us because we can kind of see where the priorities lie within the community as far as concerns go. So if you click on any of these, you can see what their comment was. This is the category of comments, which is generally feels unsafe. And then again, it's had 6 votes. So something certainly to consider when we're developing recommendations. If you want to submit your own, you can click start an entry. And then here we have a drop down of the type of concern. And there's a whole host of options here. There's also other if that your concern doesn't necessarily fit these. Then you can type in what that other might be. You can type in comments. In order to pinpoint the specific location, you can either click on the map, which again, my base map is not loading. I can see if we can get a different one loaded. Okay, must be my internet connection. But regardless, you can click a point wherever within the city. This is the city boundary right here in green. You can fill it in. You can add a photo or video in support if you want. It's also important to note that you don't have to fill in any of these in particular. Whatever you want to provide is great. And then you can click report it. I'm not going to click that for the purposes of this meeting, but that's kind of the methodology for how this works. And it's the same for each category. Just quickly, a couple tools over here. This is zoom in, zoom out. If you want to get to the full extent of the city, again, you click the home button. If you want to use your current location, you click that button right below there. If you want to type in a specific address, maybe you want to type in Hannaford, you can type that in and it'll work just like Google Maps. And then this is your base map gallery. So if you want to look at maybe an aerial image of the city rather than a traditional map, you can do that. There are lots of options here. So that's kind of the web crowdsourcing app in a nutshell. And I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint here. If I can just get a thumbs up that that is showing the slide that I was on. Okay. And yeah, I guess we'll take a pause and answer any questions. Liam, I'm not sure if there are any.
Yeah, there are a
questions.
couple. I'm going to go just down the list in the order that they came in.
Okay, great.
The first is if there's any possibility of this being upgraded to a downloadable Apple or Android app. And before I even turn that over to you, I'd say I think that adds a lot of time and expense to the project. And what I've done that I think is a adequate substitute is I save it as a bookmark, and rather than one click to get into an app, I open I have an iPhone, so in my case it's Safari, and there's still an icon there. So if I'm walking the streets of Kingston and I encounter an issue, I open Safari and I just go right to my bookmark. It's not an ideal solution, but I found it's an adequate substitute, and I would recommend that for anyone who wants it as a mobile app.
Great. I think you more or less answered that, Liam, but I think, yeah, I think there's a hesitation sometimes to create an app that's downloadable just because people have, you know, hundreds of apps on their iPhones, and it can get a little bit overwhelming. So it's a web-based app, and again, it's configured both for your mobile device as well as a desktop. So.
And so I also have 2 comments that have been placed in the Q&A, and I just want to acknowledge that they're going to be written down and that you've heard them. Their requests to put trails and current bus routes on the map, which I think is quite doable. And
Yeah,
the last request was for the comment section in the app to be expanded so that users can more easily write and correct what the comments that they post.
okay, great. No, that's all really good feedback, and we can certainly look into adding those functionalities. Great. Anything else, Liam, or are we?
It looks like everything's addressed. Just looking at the chat, it looks like some people had questions about whether the app is just for cell phones, and it can be accessed from your desktop as well. If you're out walking around and you have an issue and you remember the location when you get home, you can very easily log onto a computer and put in your information that way as well.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So I think with that, we will move forward to some of our quantitative analysis that we've performed so far. Oops, just kidding. We have another poll. So this is kind of an open-ended question, and you can respond to this either all 3 words in one response or 1 word per response with multiple responses. But the question is, what are 3 words you would use to describe walking in Kingston? And these will kind of flash before us as people answer. Lonely. Tripping. Look both ways. Hazards. Lovely. Charming. So great. Great. So we've got a wide range of experiences and opinions here, which is great. Some good, some bad. Some probably in between. Dangerous and difficult are coming up, as well as tripping. So good information. But also some nice, you know, historic, beautiful, charming. So, you know, a lot to work with here, a lot of opportunity. Give it 1 more second, see. These are great. I like the word clouds, they're fun. Okay, moving forward with the more technical approach of our analysis, we're going to go into the time-lapse camera analysis that we performed. So as Lee mentioned, we use these time-lapse cameras in communities to get some really specific data on how pedestrians and bicyclists are moving at a particular location or intersection. And so basically what happens is, as you can see, these are essentially trail cameras. But rather than looking at deer, we're looking at people. And they basically take a photo every 3 seconds. So we get a compilation of that in video format, and we can kind of see how people are moving about a particular segment of the roadway or intersection. And it provides really granular data as opposed to turning movements, counts, crash data, some of the more common data that you'll look at for a transportation plan. So this gives us movement patterns, desire paths, and we can look at it based on the time of day as well as whether it's a weekend or a weekday or the time of year. So it's really great, interesting data, and we often learn a lot from these analyses. So for the city of Kingston, we chose 5 intersections based on conversations with the city as well as our project advisory committee. And these were the 5 that we came up with: Cornell and Smith, Washington and Marius, Harding and Albany, Broadway and Appeal, and Washington near the Dutch Village Apartments. And we looked at one weekend and one weekday to kind of compare the trends between the two. And we focused on the peak travel periods for those. So those are, generally speaking, 7 to 9 a.m. is an AM peak, 11 to 1 p.m. is a midday peak, and 4 to 6 is a PM peak. So we're just going to kind of briefly walk through each of these intersections, and we're still kind of in the process of doing the full analysis of these, but just some initial takeaways that we've seen for each of these. So Albany and Harding, we had 119 total pedestrians, and that's relatively low compared to the rest of the intersections that we saw. However, we had 48 total bicyclists, which was actually higher than some of the other intersections. So a decent amount of bicyclist activity compared to some of the other locations we chose. You can see for the most part, pedestrians followed the existing pedestrian infrastructure that was available. But you can also notice on the right here is the bicyclist behaviors, and you can see that there was a lot of travel on the sidewalk. So something to consider with maybe this is an appropriate area for some additional bicycle infrastructure, because clearly people aren't feeling comfortable riding on the roadway. Next one is Broadway and Appeal. You can see a decent amount more of pedestrian activity, but significantly less bicyclist activity. You'll notice here, kind of at the intersection, there's 4 main broad lines at the intersection. However, there is not a crosswalk at that southeast corner. So there's a decent amount of people crossing at undesignated crossing locations. And that's kind of also reflected in the fact that there are these thin lines here, which represent a small amount of pedestrians, but just showing that people are making crossing intersections kind of haphazardly across this intersection. Something also interesting to note is some people, I think, particularly in the early morning hours, were using the median to walk right through the middle of the roadway, which is kind of interesting. And then again, limited bicyclist activity, but there was some use of the sidewalk as well at this location. Cornell and Smith was actually the busiest intersection that we looked at. Most of the pedestrian activity was driven by the post office. And for the most part, pedestrians were pretty well behaved at this intersection, and they used the crosswalks and used the sidewalks as appropriate. You can see some people were cutting the corner there at the northeast intersection, but that's kind of to be expected. A decent amount of, actually the highest amount of bicyclist activity as well. And some sidewalk usage, but certainly less than we saw at other locations. Washington at Dutch Village. This was chosen due to the fact that there was a bicyclist fatality in recent history here. So just wanted to understand a little bit better of how people were using this area. And you can see, I mean, particularly on the pedestrian side, again, there's limited pedestrian activity, but there was a significant amount of crossings kind of haphazardly anywhere people felt they felt safest to cross. And I can just say anecdotally, looking at the camera data, it was kind of like, it was a little hard to watch people try to cross here, because it was certainly some high volume traffic and low visibility, particularly in the morning hours when the sun's low. So this is a clear location that I think that we'll be developing some recommendations to create some designated crossing locations for pedestrians. Bicyclists, there were less crossings that we analyzed, but still something to consider for sure. You'll notice that there were some pedestrian movements along the rail line, and that actually was mostly the Catskill Mountain Railroad, staff members stopping traffic to have the train cross, which also seemed a little harrowing to me. But again, something interesting, and that's kind of the fun thing about doing these analyses is you get to see some interesting travel behaviors that you might not know about unless you looked at it for a long period of time. So this is really good information for us, and we'll be able to create some very specific recommendations for these priority locations based on kind of what we've seen thus far. Lastly, we looked at Washington and Marius, and a decent amount of pedestrians, but you can see also a significant amount of kind of haphazard crossings, even though there are 4 designated crosswalks at this intersection. And a decent amount of kind of haphazard bicyclist movement as well, as you can see on this photo on the right. So we're going to kind of continue to synthesize this information, but it's interesting to see it mapped out, and it kind of just helps to paint a picture in conjunction from what we're hearing from community members, as well as some of our other analyses that we'll be performing. One of which is the bicycle and pedestrian level of service analysis that we'll be performing and are in the middle of finalizing currently. And I'm going to hand it over to Liam to talk a little bit about that. But before I do, I guess we'll just take a moment here to answer any more questions.
Nothing in the Q&A or the chat that I see right now, Katie, so I think we're okay to move on.
Okay. All right, well then we actually have one more poll question here to get some more input. So similar question as before, but this one is 3 words in terms of how you would describe biking in the city. And I also, I didn't mention this on the last one, but I also want to mention if you are listening in Spanish, please feel free to respond in Spanish. We have dangerous and fun, unattractive and attractive, terrifying, risky. Sounds like some people feel a little unsafe, healthy. Dangerous is kind of the key word we're looking at here, which is why we're here, right? Inconsistent, I think that's great. Radical, defensive, dodgy. These are some great words. Unattractive, joyful. I will say that we had a great time. We had some great hosts that took us around the city, and they were total experts in biking in the city, so we felt very comfortable, but we had a great time. Gaps, limiting, serious. All right, these are great. Yeah, and this is like all very good information that we will use moving forward. I also just want to mention the last one, cars are scary. Okay, it looks like we've got a few questions. Anything that was worth answering here? Someone said it looks like 5 p.m. was a high use time weekdays and weekends, and that's something we certainly saw. Something to note that is the weekend that we used was Halloween weekend. So we do keep that in mind. We did have a decent amount of trick-or-treaters on the time-lapse cameras. And yeah, at this point, I think we do not anticipate doing more camera analysis, but it has been really informative, and I think it's a good cross-section of information we've looked at thus far that will help us steer recommendations, which obviously will ultimately be refined after being reviewed by the public. Okay, so moving forward, Liam, I think this is you talking a little bit about what we have been working on with bicycle and pedestrian level of service.
Yeah, so another way that we're collecting information about biking and walking in Kingston is through this level of service survey, which I've been performing around town. You may have seen me pacing out the width of the sidewalk or darting across the road, trying to figure out the width of everything. And what this does is it evaluates on all of these major roadways highlighted the space that cars have to travel, the space that bicycles have to travel, space that pedestrians have to travel, and the separation between them. And why this is important is we corroborate this with the ideas, the experiences, the observations that you provide with the crowdsourcing app and the survey, and where the human perception and the physical conditions overlap. We know that those are the real problem areas that will be a priority moving forward with the plan.
Great, thanks, Liam. So yeah, so we are in the process of basically vetting this. We've analyzed it and we're kind of internally vetting this, and we're going to discuss it with both the city and the project advisory committee moving forward. And it's interesting because it's a national methodology. It's something that we kind of use to compare community across community, but obviously the opinions and experiences of people who are actually on the streets every day might not jive with exactly what we're mapping. So it's an interesting conversation, and those conversations honestly lead to some really interesting recommendations we found. So quick question I saw in the chat was, are there areas without sidewalks being looked at? And yes, I think, Liam, you can confirm this, but some of these roadways do not have sidewalks.
Yeah, that's correct. So the ones that we were surveying are really just the most heavily traveled roads in Kingston. And so sometimes that's car traffic, sometimes that's bicycle and pedestrian traffic. And as anyone who's driven or walked around town knows, it doesn't have to have sidewalks for people to be walking on the side of the road. So those are some of the most important roads to evaluate. I've seen in our survey a lot of comments about Wilbur Ave. There's almost no room to walk on the side of Wilbur Ave, but it's important to survey the conditions of that road and see if any sidewalk or pedestrian facilities could be added in the space that road has. So yeah, short version is areas without sidewalks are being looked at.
Great. Okay, so that's kind of the summary of where we're at as far as our data collection goes. And this has all been really good. And I think, but again, overlapping kind of these different methods of analysis will provide some clear pictures as to what we need to focus on moving forward. So with that, I'm going to move ahead in our presentation. And I know we've been answering Q&As kind of throughout the presentation, but if anyone has any lingering questions or thoughts that they want to provide, whether it's just a comment on something that you think is important for us to know, or if it's something you have a question about our process, or something that you might think that we should consider looking at, we'd be welcome to any input.
There's a comment right now that says, requesting us to do a camera analysis along Broadway now that the new bike lanes are open. And as Katie said, we have completed that portion of our analysis, but it doesn't mean that, if it is deemed necessary while working with the city or while we continue to gather our information that we feel it's important to evaluate another intersection or portion of a street, we will do that, but nothing is planned at this time. But we'll definitely take that into consideration.
For audio listeners, we are answering some questions in the Q&A chat box. There's some great ones there. Any plans to introduce a city bike type program? We've had lots of conversations about bike shares in the city of Kingston in the past, and we don't have the funding to do that. We would of course be open if we could find a funder to produce an official program. We'd be very open to that, I think. I don't know if I can speak for the whole city in that, but I think we would absolutely look into it. But we would like to try to do a bike share program. There's a question about other bike and pedestrian trails to be added. Yeah, if we are missing any of the trails, we will absolutely add them. Any new infrastructure like Broadway that's just opened up, that has literally just opened up, and so some of that data might need to be added.
Excuse me, Emily, can I interrupt before this excellent question by Bob Dennison gets buried by the other questions in the chat? He asked us to talk a little bit about the ADA transition plan, which thank you, Bob. I think that's a little bit of an alley-oop for us because it's a really important and a valuable part of the plan. Similar to how the level of service survey evaluates roadways, an important part of the ADA transition plan is evaluating sidewalks. Kingston, through our conversations with them, is really committed to making it an accessible city for all levels of ability. An ADA transition plan is an excellent way to analyze where a city's pedestrian facilities have weak points and what needs to be the focus of improving them. So more so than we're looking at pedestrian bicycle interaction with cars, we're looking at overall accessibility for pedestrians, which judging by the size of tripping and all the word clouds from the polls, everyone is aware of how challenging our sidewalks can be. So that will be a huge thing to be addressed by an ADA transition plan: smooth and continuous sidewalks and accessible curbs with ramps, so that so wheelchair bound and other accessible people can use our sidewalks, and in general it makes the facilities better for everyone around the city. So that will be a very important part of the plan moving forward, that now that we've completed the initial level of service analysis, we're going to dive deeper and collect data for an ADA transition plan as well.
For the questions about specific locations, I would ask you all to submit what you might like to see in those locations. I think that's the kind of feedback we're looking for that can inform our plan here. I'm not going to speak to every specific location and the plans at those locations, but we definitely would like to hear your feedback about what you'd like to see in those locations. So please add that.
I think there's a comment here about pedestrian bag boxes really get cars to stop without enforcement. How do you think pedestrian experience can be improved? And, you know, without definitively saying about that particular location at this point, I think there are some improvements we could consider. And I think there was another question that also kind of got at this, maybe something like a leading pedestrian interval where there is just a designated moment for just pedestrians to move about the intersection, no cars, and that can kind of give people a leg up on getting safely through the intersection or being more visible within that intersection before vehicles starting to move. So you kind of, you know, I think part of this will be developing kind of a toolbox of approaches. In addition to having specific intersection improvements, we'll also have tools that can be applied to several locations throughout the city, so that when these issues get identified kind of on a piecemeal basis moving into the future, the city's, you know, kind of got a set of tools that they know that they can implement and have successfully been implemented maybe at like a priority intersection that we analyzed with the cameras, for instance. Any other questions that jump out to people on the panelists?
I will mention this one.
Oh, sorry,
Oh,
Emily.
go ahead, Liam. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to continue reading a couple questions that I didn't think had been answered yet. Okay. We have a question about whether we're looking at Vision 0 for traffic calming, which if any of my BNL cohorts would like to take that, I have a brief answer, which is yes, things like lower speed limits and constructing infrastructure that favors or separates pedestrians and cars and reduces car accessibility in a city is a pretty common recommendation that comes as a result of a master plan like this. Emily, this one might be for you. Are we coordinating with Kingston Forward?
I tried to answer that. Maybe I didn't click submit. There's a lot. I hope you all understand there's a lot of different chats and Q&As going on. We're trying to cover it all. With Kingston Forward, yes, Kingston Forward is the planning project for Kingston's rezoning, and we have been in connection with them. We've shared data back and forth, and we've been in connection with both sets of consultants have been in touch with each other.
And I think there's some great opportunity that these are both kind of happening concurrently, just because, you know, your land use patterns and what's happening on the private side of development has a significant impact on what's happening on the public side of things within the roadway and vice versa. So if we can coordinate kind of the shared vision, which I think, you know, there's a pretty clear vision from the city of supporting walking and biking essentially throughout the entire city. We can make sure that the recommendations that we have kind of jive with the new zoning, form-based zoning that is being developed there.
And also there's a question about coordinating with Ulster County and Kingston departments of Public Works, and members of both of them are on our project advisory committee. So absolutely, they're a part of this whole process, a part of this whole conversation. We're sharing data and again, sharing projects that are moving forward so that all of this thinking is, as you know, working together to the greatest extent.
A pretty interesting question here. Will it, if so, how and address the embedded automobile culture we have in Kingston and in both cities and towns in the US? And I will say, yes, you are not alone. The entire United States kind of signed on to the automobile in the mid-20th century, and we're kind of all dealing with the effects of that, particularly on the private side of development. And I think, I mean, at least my best answer at this point is it's incremental, and a lot of that will be supported by your zoning code update and ensuring that, you know, your parking minimum requirements are appropriate. Your buildings are fronting the street rather than parking lots, and just making it easier to connect to places, activity centers, residential areas, just making it more attractive and more comfortable between those things. And it will take time for us ultimately to fix that, but that's kind of one of the underlying themes of this plan for sure. I think we've got a lot of great recommendations for considering specific intersections, which is awesome. And we'll be cataloging all of these moving forward and putting it part of our qualitative data analysis.
I think I want to read John Gospelin's comment, more of a question. He says that some areas of Kingston are so dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists that only those with no options to use them, maybe for those with only no options to use them. The Washington Ave Dutch Village area is one of them. I think that's a good thing to record.
Emily, this might be a question for you. Will pedestrian and bicyclist access needs of the supporting housing being built by RUPCO at the Quality Inn just over the line in the town of Ulster be included in this plan?
So our plan limits is the city of Kingston, and that project we can design up into the city limit. We can that's what we can consider. But I'm sure that the city will be in touch with the county when that project is in its planning phases and will collaborate. I have heard that they will be doing some private transportation from the Quality Inn into services, but I also personally recognize that there's a great need for pedestrian access along that route. So unfortunately, we can plan up into the city limits.
There's a few questions about off-road trails and connections to off-road trails. And that certainly is a big part of this, understanding that, these are really the most comfortable facilities for people to travel on. We want to really promote the use of those. So that certainly will be a part of this report.
And we've already shared with the consultants, of course, about the Green Line network of trails, especially the trails that are still envisioned that are part of that network. So that's that network, if not showing up in our maps, that's an oversight, but those are absolutely being considered.
There's a question, is the bike lane on Broadway going to continue down to the roundabout? I'm not sure if that can be answered at this point, but Emily, I'll give you that one.
Yeah, I can try the best. As far as I know, not this time. So the bike lane on Broadway was part of a very specific project that ends at the YMCA in Grand and Pine Street. And there's no plans at this time to continue it down. In the future, I think there could be recommendations in this bike ped master plan that bike lane continue on. But at this time, I'm not aware of specific plans to have it continue. I also want to say that a representative from REPCO is saying that REPCO is advocating with the UCTC and the DOT to put in LED. I just lost the question. I think to put in LED.
Sorry.
Yeah. I think that meant signalization. So it sounds like, as I was saying, I think REPCO, the county, and the city are all in talk about trying to support pedestrians and cyclists for the Quality in future project.
Kara, there's a question, will the cameras get moved to new locations for additional data? Not at this time. We just kind of tried to hone in on some of the key intersections based on conversations we've had with some key stakeholders. But the idea is that these are kind of representative intersections, and that any takeaways we can glean from the analysis there, you can apply to multiple intersections within the city.
I wanted to, again, invite any Spanish speakers to submit any questions. We do have our live interpreters here that can go back and forth between English and Spanish. So if you'd like to ask a question in Spanish, please do.
Okay, looks like we've just got a few more questions in here and a few more minutes left here, so we'll try to do our best to answer the rest of these. This is a great question. Is there a way to reach out to youth in Kingston to involve them in this process? And that's something we really enjoy doing, mostly because it's just fun to talk to kids about biking and walking, particularly because they don't have an option most of the time, and they're some of the most avid walkers and bikers throughout the city. So that's something we can certainly consider. I think it would be a great piece of information, and maybe we will reach out to our PAC and kind of help that, or maybe get some good connections with the school district so that we can make that happen. But yeah, that's a great suggestion.
And I can add that we did invite a YMCA Farm Project youth crew member to join our project advisory committee. So we're still hoping that we'll have that person join us in future meetings.
Kevin, I think mentioned something about the climate smart community goal of active transportation. Will the pedestrian and bike master plan have quantitative usage targets to meet those reductions, or sorry, mode share targets? At this point, I don't think that we are going to be establishing a specific quantitative, we want X amount of vehicle trips switched to non-vehicle trips, but we will certainly make sure that, our plan ties into your climate smart community goals and recognizes the fact that the city has those goals, just to kind of leverage both planning processes or initiatives for the city, and understanding that they have a lot of overlap in terms of sustainable future.
I'll try to answer this one. The question is wondering if the railroad is involved, or are they immune to all this? The representatives of the tourist train at the Hannaford Plaza are more than welcome to give their feedback and suggestions. We invite them to give their opinion, like everyone else in the city. The railroad crossings for pedestrians are a big consideration for safety. And there are a few projects for the city where that's specifically being addressed. On Foxhall, for example, the railroad crossings are a big consideration that the city takes very seriously.
All right, I think we have time for maybe one or two more if we can. Identify any ones that are worth. Another dangerous area is the roundabout area adventure that pedestrian and cyclist counts are down there as compared to under the old format. That's not one of the intersections that we chose, particularly probably because it was recently improved, but something certainly to consider. And maybe there are some little tweaks we could recommend to help improve the experience for non-motorists at that location.
I'll answer Rose's question about street closures. I think that the city would be open to that at appropriate times. We just need more capacity to organize it. I think that would be a lot of fun. I think we've talked about it before, but it would be great to bring it up again.
Okay, and then I guess there's just one last question. Any plans to improve the bike lane to the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail on Route 32? And Emily, I'm going to let you take that one.
Sorry, y'all, my screen flipped a little bit there. Let me try to think about where that is. So the rail trail from 32, are you talking about from Rockwell Lane up? Is that can you repeat the question for me, Katie?
Sure, let me find it.
I'm actually really familiar with the area, Emily.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much between the Wallkill Valley Rail Trail. So yeah, Rockwell and the health complex, because they did just put in a new, there's no getting accessible on that slope, but it's a relatively accessible sidewalk. It's at least smooth and continuous and about 5 feet wide, I think. But between those two, it's just the shoulder of 32. That's this bike lane, and it has the rumble strip. So really, I mean, when I evaluated it for the level of service, I put it as a really poor pavement condition, because having a rumble strip is great for a car, but as far as a bicyclist is concerned, it's essentially riding over rocks. It's like mountain biking. So there's not really space for a specific improvement there without infringing on the state right of way. So the most likely alternative would be an alternate route, which we may end up proposing, but it's certainly been taken into account.
And my understanding is that the sidewalks that were installed there was part of the Empire State Trail. And so that's how the Empire State Trail's consideration for that part was to put in the sidewalks there.
All right, well, it looks like we made it through our list of questions here. The last one I saw quickly there was, are we looking at bike safety on Albany? And yes, the answer is yes to that for sure. So that being said, I think we're just going to quickly go over some next steps for us. And Leah, I think this is you.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone because the input that we just received through the Q&A in the chat was really amazing. And obviously, like Emily said, we weren't going to address every single intersection or location concern that was brought up, but we have all of that collected within the Q&A and chat. And we also encourage you again to go to that crowdsourcing app that Katie walked you through, because you could again pinpoint these exact things and repeat your feedback there. And again, encourage your friends, colleagues, anyone to really get on there, because like it's already been mentioned, it's the feedback from all of you who live in the city and use the city daily is the feedback that's going to have the, make this report the strongest it can be. So again, over the next few months, we're going to have these portals open for the survey, which again are in hard copy form throughout the city as well. The crowdsourcing app is open. And again, visit Engage Kingston, provide your email, and you'll be kept in the loop as this project continues to unfold. And then from here, again, we're going to begin to gather, to really analyze all of this data that we've gathered to begin to develop a needs assessment. And as I said about the community survey and crowdsourcing app tools are going to remain open, and we encourage all of you to help get the word out, and we'll continue to promote it on our end. And then we're going to again start to identify these preliminary recommendations to the city to, as we mentioned throughout this, to improve existing infrastructure and really close in the gaps that exist. Again, you guys have already brought up endless examples of gaps that need to be addressed or existing infrastructure that needs to be improved. And it's all been incredible feedback. And we thank you all for hanging out with us all night and staying with us for the entire presentation. And Emily, I don't know if you have any closing words for everyone.
You've said a lot of it wonderfully. Thank you, Lee. Yeah, we thank you all for being here. I want to, of course, drive everyone to please visit engagekingston.com. That's where these surveys, the crowdsource app is. I want to remind you again that paper surveys are also at the Kingston Library, both in English and Spanish. So you can have people go there to do it. Anyone can email me, and I'm happy to print out and deliver flyers. My email is eflynn, EFLYNN, @kingston-ny.gov. I also want to say a huge thank you to our interpreters. We didn't get any waves saying that we were talking too fast. I really appreciate the hard work that they've put in to make this more accessible. I don't want to leave this meeting without thanking them. I also want to say thank you to the Public Advisory Committee. Thank you for giving us that feedback. We couldn't do it without you. Thank you to everyone else. I'm sure I'm forgetting something to say, but thanks for joining us tonight. Please give us your feedback.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody. So I'm going to stop my recording now.